Welcome to today's seminar, Why a Poverty Reduction Summit. We're delighted to be chatting with Jim, Celeste, and Bhavana. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us on this call. Jim Hughes is the president of the Graham Beck Foundation. Also joining us is Celeste Licorish of Speak Now Hamilton. And finally, Bhavana Varma, who has extensive experience with the United Ways, first in St. Catharines, and then leading the local chapter in Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington region. I'll share a little bit more about each of them as we go through the call. But I'm going to actually start by just getting right into it and asking people a number of questions about the summit and just generally about the work that they're doing. But first of all, James, Celeste, Bhavana, tell us why you're so excited about the Poverty Reduction Summit coming up in just a few weeks.
Sorry, this is for me? Yeah?
Either one of you, just jump in.
Okay, well, I'm looking to learn from everyone else. Whenever I come to these summits, firstly, Paul, you energize us with your enthusiasm and your amazing energy. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm also looking forward to hearing from other communities what they're doing so we can rip off and duplicate R&D, as we call it, and bring some stuff back to Kingston.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bhavana. Celeste, how about you? What's exciting you about what's coming up?
What's exciting me is, like what Bhavana was saying, to just get together with other people who are doing this kind of work, really who are committed to making poverty go away, disappear, not be an issue anymore, and see what are the things that people are using, what are some of the strategies, what are some of the things that are working, and especially the things that are not working, so that we can learn from each other. That's really fascinating to me. And of course, I love anything that has to do with engaging the citizen voice, so I'm looking forward to meeting and talking to people with lived experience and finding out what their take is on the work and the collective impact movement.
Fantastic, and you're a plenary panelist at the summit, so we're looking forward to hearing your story even further there. James?
Yeah, I share everyone's enthusiasm about this upcoming summit. I think it's seminal. I think it's a real milestone in that in the great work that has been done and needs to be done to really move the needle on poverty in this country. And I'm particularly excited about the fact that so many people from so many different sectors are converging on Ottawa for this. So it's the community sector will be very, very well represented. So will, I think, people with lived experience. But we're also, I think, fortunate to have municipal leaders from right across the country and provincial leaders as well. Business will be in the room. And so I think we do have the elements of what truly is a summit, a really coming together to sort out not only where we are, but where we need to go, as I say, to move that needle on poverty in Canada.
That's fantastic, all three of you. You know, we have over 300 people coming. It is amazing the caliber of thinking that is coming together there, and the agenda is really pulling together beautifully. And we're just so thrilled. Matter of fact, on Tuesday, I'm meeting with Mayor Naheed Nenshi from Calgary, and many of you know he just won Mayor of the World. He was elected as one of the best mayors of the world this year, and he'll be our keynote on the Thursday morning. Okay, let's get into this call, and I'm going to start with a few questions for Bhavana, and just really wanting to hear from you and your thoughts about you were part of creating, Bhavana, you were part of creating a poverty reduction strategy for the region of Kingston, Frontenac, Addington, and Lennox. I know there's lots of driving in that region.
Yeah.
There's been wide support from large anchors in the region, the United Way and the Kingston municipality, namely. Can you speak to how your community gained so much traction with this initiative, and what is the key to sustaining this poverty reduction strategy you're working on?
That's a great question. So firstly, we actually started with the urban center of Kingston, and as we're learning from this, we'll expand into the rural areas because we still have to figure out how best to address poverty in areas where transportation and access is a challenge. But the foundation was laid by the poverty roundtable that was created by the Mayor's Task Force in 2008 in Kingston. And what we've done is built on a lot of the work they did. And the first thing that we did was recognize that the city, the United Way, the Poverty Roundtable, we all had roles to play. The main thing was that we were working together with a common goal. We came at it from different angles and finding ways to first establish a baseline on how we wanted to move forward and guiding principles. The whole process was very inclusive. It was built on trust and consensus. What was very rewarding was the groundwork that we did. We spent over a year in conversations with, whether it was a forum or one-on-one conversations. It was listening to people who were impacted the most, listening to people who were working in the field, listening to people who had ideas about what they wanted to do differently, and then pulling it together. So at all times between the city, the Community Health Center, and the United Way, our role was really the fun part. We were facilitating the conversations, and even though it made us feel uncomfortable because there was chaos at a lot of this time, what was great was that everyone felt their voices were heard. And the most rewarding piece was, for me, at the end of it, was how people expressed that they actually felt that their voices were heard and something was being done about it. And the voice of people who are living in poverty or have lived in poverty formed the framework for us going forward. So that gave us a really solid foundation to move ahead. I think that's what's actually kept us going.
That's fantastic. What an inspiring story. But Pavna, you know, when you think of Kingston, I always think of it as a fairly wealthy community. Talk to me a little bit about poverty in the Kingston area.
Well, it's a tale of two cities. We do have a higher than average median income. We have the largest number of PhDs per capita in the country. We have, you know, really strong educational institutions, a large public sector, a thriving research and private sector. We also have a number of people who live, 15% of our population lives below the poverty line. They live on low incomes. A lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet. The number of youth at risk is higher as a percent of the population than Toronto. Our food bank numbers, like everywhere else, are growing. The nice part of Kingston is we're a very connected city, so everyone knows everyone else and everyone wants to help each other. So once we've identified the problem, a lot of people will actually, like you, didn't think there was an issue. They didn't think poverty was an issue. So I think part of the initiative was really raising just a knowledge base of what the data showed us. And once we'd done that and people actually saw that their neighbors and friends were impacted and struggling to get through some of the challenges of everyday living, it really resonated with them.
What a great answer, Pavna, because, you know, on the one hand, you started by saying, look, we are a community with tremendous assets and tremendous gifts. And, you know, one of the keys is to bring all those assets and gifts together and bring them together with people who aren't experiencing the same level of quality of life as the rest of the community. And you were saying about 15% of the population. And really it's about trying to open up that awareness, but then also to move hearts to want to work together. And I love the fact that you use the words, work, what do they want to do differently? You know? So it's a recognition that all the good things we're doing, they're helping, but not enough. We need to figure out how we might move things along just a little bit more here to get this last 15% to experience the quality of life that the vast majority share.
And I have to say, the frontline agencies in Kingston do an amazing job, as does everyone across the country. But again, I think working together, having the voice of people with lived experience, having the agencies around the table, having individuals and organizations from across the community, that's what made it very special, and how everyone felt important and connected.
How everyone felt important and connected. Lovely words to end on. I'm hoping you'll be around for at least a few of the questions. I know you've got to leave just a bit early today, but I'm going to move over to Jim Hughes, and and just ask a few questions of you, Jim. And I know, Jim, you're at the Graham Beck Foundation, but you're also the former Deputy Minister of Social Development in New Brunswick. And you played a really pivotal role there in developing a provincial poverty reduction strategy. Prior to that, you were with Quebec's Old Brewery Mission, a very large homelessness organization. And you sat on the board of the National Council of Welfare and others. Tremendous experience that you're bringing here, like Bhavana and Celeste. But let's tell us about this amazing work you did in the province of New Brunswick, recognizing that this gathering is not just about cities reducing poverty. It's really about looking at provinces and territories that have been working to reduce poverty and cities that have been reducing poverty, and seeing how we can get provinces and cities to find each other as strategic partners. Tell us a little bit about the work in New Brunswick and the inspiring outcomes that you achieved there.
Yeah, those were very, very exciting days. Thanks, Paul, for the chance to talk about it. Yeah, so it was back in 2008, and the Liberal government was scratching its head about what it would like to do in the poverty area, and it made a very interesting decision, actually an interesting couple of decisions in terms of moving the file forward. First of all, it said we can't reduce poverty alone as a province. It's as a government. It's not only us who have the drivers to reduce poverty. It's the business sector, it's the community sector, it's people living in poverty and themselves and their role in helping both themselves, their neighbors, and their communities to move people up and out of poverty. So that there was a recognition that an initiative around poverty reduction in New Brunswick should be a little bit different. It shouldn't be just a government initiative. It should be a process to develop a plan for New Brunswick. So right from the beginning, it was conceived of as a multi-sectoral process, and chairs of the process from the government sector, the business sector, and the community sector, and eventually a representative of people working, living or having lived in poverty was selected, so that all sectors would be together in a leadership role to drive the process towards a provincial plan. So I think that was a very exciting and novel way to go about it. It took quite a long time. A lot of investment was made in the process itself, both through in-person and online types of mechanisms to really hear what people were saying about the poverty issue and what could be done about it. And it all came together in a final forum where, with the provincial premier in the chair and the leader of the opposition right beside him, and representatives from all different stakeholder groups were together for 2 or 3 days, and they actually adopted a plan, gave it a name, Overcoming Poverty Together, and that was in late 2009, and it is still the plan to this day, despite the fact that the government has changed 2 or 3 times. That's the other really interesting, well, 2 times. The Liberals lost to the Conservatives in 2011, I believe, and then, or 2010 or 11, excuse my dates, and now the Liberals just actually got back into power late last year in New Brunswick. So despite these changes of government, the actual poverty reduction plan hasn't just continued on, it's been renewed and reinforced through that whole period of time, because I think of the really good process steps that were put into place. So it was conceived of as a plan for all of New Brunswick. It was brought to the province as a bipartisan initiative, and I think that's what has made it sustainable. And I think part of its success, and its success is not just in the process. The child poverty rates have gone down in the province 12% by 2012 numbers. I think largely because of this really coherent approach that was taken. It included a poverty reduction law called the Economic and Social Inclusion Act. It created a Crown Corporation to be responsible for overseeing the commitments that were made in the plan. And it also involved a very clear and articulate role for communities in terms of what their role would be in this process as well. It's multi-sectoral at all levels, and as I say, I think it's really starting to pay off in the province.
That's great, Jim. And I know that the Vibrant Communities folks right at that time were also very active in talking with you, learning from you, trying to share what we've been seeing elsewhere. What I love so much about this strategy in New Brunswick is that it's truly a nonpartisan poverty reduction strategy. You're one of the early provinces that came up with the strategy. The way that you developed it was classic. In many ways, it mirrors what Bhavana was talking about that she was doing and the municipality were doing in Kingston, involving all voices, trying to come up with agreement, building commitment and momentum throughout the province. And what's been remarkable is that it has stayed nonpartisan, meaning that all of the parties continue to be supportive of that. And it really shows what can be done and what we need to keep promoting everywhere in every province and as a federal community to be looking at making poverty a nonpartisan issue, one that we can truly overcome. Jim, just any highlights in terms of the last 5 years of what's happened in New Brunswick that we can be really quite proud of?
Well, yeah, as I said, they're into their 2.0 plan now. They've actually, through a different but also equally, I think, engaging and bipartisan process, they have renewed the plan with, I think, a new urgency around some of the issues that I do think that the country needs to get to. I mean, though there's some nice progress in some specific areas in the poverty reduction space, there's still so much work to do. Overall, our numbers have been pretty stagnant in the country, and we really have to, double down on some things to make sure we start to move them down. And I think New Brunswick is recognizing that. They're talking about investments on the income security side and welfare reform. They're talking about investments in the early learning space as well as in training and other areas. So I really think focusing in on some things that really do work, where the evidence is really clear that these things can make a difference, is I think part of the way forward, not just for New Brunswick, but for the whole country.
Absolutely, but you have been making progress. I know that in the city of St. John, poverty is down almost 10 points. So they've reduced poverty from 28% down nearly around 18. Now, obviously, those numbers are open for debate to some degree, but what we do know for sure is that poverty has gone down substantially in that city. And I'm hoping to see that in other cities, not only in New Brunswick, but all across Canada. Jim, talking about that, what are you seeing in other provinces? And what are some of the hopeful signs that continue to unfold?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So what we're seeing is a real wave of interest at the provincial level around poverty reduction strategies themselves. So the point isn't that there is a strategy per se, but that it becomes of political importance when a strategy is developed and announced. It becomes clear that in most of these plans that we're seeing, or these strategies, we're seeing new architecture that is being put into place where we're identifying who's going to be responsible for starting to actually initiate the kinds of activities that need to be initiated to reduce poverty. So it's really an indication, and I think we've got almost all the provinces now have adopted plans. I know Alberta is still scratching its head, but moving that file forward. I think BC hopefully will join the movement as well in time, so that in fact we have all provinces now starting to really locking arms together and hopefully even starting to learn from each other more regarding successful initiatives and processes to reduce poverty. So having the relationships and having that architecture in place is a really important preamble to getting the numbers to move in the right direction.
And it's a fantastic movement because we have every province and territory with a poverty reduction strategy. I know that British Columbia has not yet formally announced, but I know they will also be attending, 3 or 4 of them from the government, coming to represent the incredible work that's happening also in that province.
Yep.
You know, it's an exciting movement, and on tomorrow morning I'm going to be on a call with some people in the province of Ontario, and we're going to be informed about a beautiful new announcement that's going to be coming. That's going to be quite substantial. I don't want to give any of it away, but stay tuned, watch the papers for some new ideas that are coming out of Ontario and some new initiatives. I know Saskatchewan just recently announced the territories continue to work in a remarkable way. Our goal is to have just every province and territory represented at the summit, and we're getting very close to that now. So thanks, Jim, for all your work. You've been helping us quite a lot on that area. I'm going to move over to Celeste now, and I know we've been just so inspired by Celeste's work and by her ideas, and she's an amazing person from the city of Hamilton, and has been working there at developing a speakers bureau, and we're going to just learn a little bit more about that. But really, what she's been doing is giving voice to people with lived experience of poverty, and helping to bring that voice forward. She speaks in Canada and has been getting requests through the United States to come and tell her story and the story of Hamilton and involving people with lived experience. Her own background is so eclectic, a degree in philosophy, with experience in marketing, public relations, and carpentry. So a nice mix there of both hands-on and a deep thinker. And we're going to hear your story, Celeste, and thank you so much for joining us. Hey, do you want to just tell me a little bit about your own experience in Hamilton, how you got involved in the Speakers Bureau, and then just a little bit about the Speakers Bureau?
Sure, I'll give you a little bit. Thanks, Paul. That was such a lovely introduction. I'll give you a little bit of background on how I came to be involved with the Roundtable, and it's actually a pretty interesting reflection on how the city of Hamilton works. So I am a person of lived experience. I'm raising 3 kids on my own, and I have been for the past, gosh, over a decade, because my youngest twins are 10. But we have a neighborhood development strategy here in Hamilton that in my neighborhood, which is a low-income neighborhood in East Hamilton, they have community hubs and community groups. And so I came to this work by people who came to my neighborhood asking questions, looking for assets, saying, how would you like to be involved? So me raising my kids, feeling really disconnected from the community, had opportunities through our community hubs to become a little bit more involved in my neighborhood and with my neighbors, to think, well, I'm not just here all by myself. There are others who are struggling. There are other wonderful things in my community. So little by little, by people coming and approaching me and talking to me about what can we do to make our neighborhood better, that sort of piqued my curiosity and got me involved. The carpentry part is interesting as well. When I got trained in carpentry, one of my first jobs, my first and only job actually, once I graduated from that, was to work in my neighborhood at fixing houses for low-income people in the north end of Hamilton. And it was really a really great experience for me, because these are people like myself who have homes or places that they live and they couldn't afford to fix them. And through the Community Foundation and the City of Hamilton and the Government of Ontario, they put together a fund so that people like me who had been recently trained in the trades could go out, get some experience, and help our neighborhoods at the same time. It was while I was out working in people's backyards, putting up fences and decks and sidewalks, that I heard about the work of the Hamilton Roundtable, and that they were looking for someone to coordinate a speakers bureau. They wanted people like me with lived experience to be able to share their stories with larger audiences. At the time, I didn't even know really what the Hamilton Roundtable was all about, but because I was now a connected and engaged community person with, a background in marketing and public relations, I thought I would give the application a try, and fortunately, I got hired and was able to pull together what is now our Speakers Bureau. But if it wasn't for the background of Hamilton and the community really going into neighborhoods and finding people like me who are essentially disenfranchised, disconnected, living in poverty, and saying, hey, you have talents and gifts that we're interested in, and you can share them and we'll help you develop them. I don't know, I might still be working in construction or doing something else. So having said that, I'll go into a little bit about why the Speakers Bureau actually was developed and exists. So the Roundtable works a lot with income disparity, and one of their priorities, they look at things like living wage, how to promote a living wage, how to get social assistance rates to be better, and they talk to a lot of people and advocate and try to make changes. They found that one of the most effective ways of getting people to listen was to have people with lived experience share their actual stories and experiences of what it's like to live on a minimum wage, what it's like to live when you can't find childcare or when you don't have appropriate housing. They had a few people on the roundtable with lived experience who would go out and tell their stories, but they decided that maybe we need to make this a little bit bigger. If we can find people who are willing to share, who can be trained on public speaking, who can be trained in a little bit about poverty and the work of the roundtable, then we would really have a good base of support to go out and really share our stories and bring a human face to what ends up a lot of the times in discussions being a lot of statistics and data around poverty. And as our chair says, if those arguments could have won the war, we wouldn't even be talking anymore, because people already know what they know about what it's like to live with not enough money, but they don't hear firsthand from the people who are living it. So when I came on board in 2013, I had to figure out ways to find people, and I basically used our network at the Roundtable. I used people through social services, through all of our affiliates through McMaster University. I actually went to some of our places like Mission Services, to food banks. People who were carrying placards on the street, I would ask them, here's what we're doing, are you interested in sharing your voice this way? We had over 60 applicants in Hamilton who said, you know what, I'm struggling, but I'm willing to talk about what that means. We were able to call that down to 28 people, and we had a 12-week training session in early 2014 where we trained people on public speaking, on media relations, on poverty issues. And since April 2014, the 20 people that have graduated through the Speakers Bureau have spoken to over 4,000 people in our community about their personal experiences. So whether it's university social work classes or boards of directors or faith groups, or just even things like when Minister Deb Matthews, who's our Associate Deputy Minister here, and Ted McMeekin, our Housing Minister, came to Hamilton to hear about what poverty is like, we weren't only able to talk about the statistics and the big picture things. We were able to have people from the Speakers Bureau saying, I was homeless, here's what it meant to me to find a home, and here's what it means to me to have a home, here's what it's like to be working for a minimum wage job. All of those types of things are very personalizing and bring a face and a voice that normally doesn't occur. The other beautiful thing that's happened through this process is that the people who have been involved in the Speakers Bureau are now part of the Roundtable. So they are now advocates and engaged in whatever types of work we're doing. We have people from the Speakers Bureau who can sit on our housing and homelessness working group and talk about what our plans mean to them. And it's a beautiful thing to watch because it's been so empowering for the people who participated and also empowering for the Roundtable as a whole.
Fantastic. Hey, so what do you say to people when you go out and speak?
What do I say to people?
Yeah, like what's your key message?
The key message is that poverty is more than just a bunch of numbers. There are actual people who are struggling, who are suffering, and you as individuals need to change. It basically comes down to, a lot of the time it comes down to, if you don't vote, vote, and if you do vote, ask if poverty is on the agenda. That kind of thing, because we're realizing that we're advocating for people to really get involved and understand what it means that their neighbors are suffering. So it's not just there's 25% of the population of children who are going to school hungry. It's my children, your neighbors, that are going to school hungry.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You know, I think a lot of organizations on the call today, people that are working in organizations, struggle with involving people with lived experience. And I don't know why. I mean, it's kind of a cultural way that the that human service organizations have developed. It's kind of like you serve others, and in that regard, you're always giving. And I think what we're calling for is a different strategy. We're saying, these are not people that are just in need. They're also people who bring a lot of gifts and ideas. And we're not just bringing people in here to advocate for things are better. We're actually wanting to get their ideas because ending poverty is good for everyone, not just for people living in poverty. But what's been your experience? What have been some of the best ways to get people with lived experience to be able to share their voice and to truly bring their wisdom to this conversation?
I think, at least in the case of the Speakers Bureau, it's been a process of developing relationships and developing trust, and to have people believe in something bigger than themselves. So everyone in the Speakers Bureau, myself included, it's not like this is a past tense situation for us. So it's not like people have come to the Speakers Bureau and they're talking about what life was like for them 20 years ago. They're in the thick of it now. So to be able to engage people in a meaningful way has meant having them believe that they're not alone in this. So poverty is a very isolating situation to be in, whether you're talking about housing, homelessness, food security, childcare, whatever it is, it's very isolating. So in bringing people into this process, it was developing relationships so that everyone around the table understood, hey, there are people in government that care, there are people at universities that care, there are your social workers that care, there are all of the service providers that care, and we're all working towards making things better for all of us. So that was a big part of it. So now you've taken people from just, look at my horrible, awful situation here, and saying, you know what, there is a movement here, there is an energy here, there is a direction that the Roundtable represents in terms of moving people up and out of poverty, and you have an important part to play in how that happens. Your voice is important, your expertise is important. And for a lot of us, even for me, that was like mind-blowing, because the last thing you talk about is how poor you are or what your actual situation is. But to have it contextualized within this movement, the collective impact movement and the Roundtable movement, of having us move away from that, I think that's been a key for people to say, yeah, you know what, things are bad, but I can help make things better. My voice matters. And so many people on the Speakers Bureau will say, it's lifted a veil of shame. Now I can talk about it, and I realize that it's a collective responsibility. I have a role, you have a role, and we're all standing shoulder to shoulder together to move out of this.
Amazing, inspirational words. Jim, Bhavana, just your response, your experience in involving the voice of lived experience in this work of reducing poverty in Canada.
Thank you, Celeste. That was very powerful. I know we struggled. We made a commitment to make sure that we involved them, and we had to keep revising how we functioned. It is intimidating. One of the things that we found, we learned from people who were at the table were sometimes if they come alone, they feel a little isolated, so we made sure that we had a couple of people who worked together, so we were kind of part of a team who came together and left together and talked about things together, so that no one felt isolated. It was slowing down a bit, so we took the time to listen to stories, and that really helped remind us how important all this experiences and how it's contributing to something else. I think respect for different voices, it was still a challenge, because I think sometimes when we organize meetings, we forget to check in on the time of day, on childcare, on transportation, and while we put the offer out, not everyone's comfortable just accepting an offer, so to really reach out and make it comfortable so people feel they're still living with dignity and a sense of belonging. That was something we all needed to realign ourselves periodically, and we still, I would love to learn more, and that's what the summit, I'm hoping, is going to teach me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Both those thoughts are circling in my mind as I think back to New Brunswick poverty reduction, where we, I think, could have done much better as regards the engagement of people with lived experience. I think there's no question about it. We did have, I think we improved over time. I think that sounds like the experience in Kingston as well, in terms of being much more sensitive to people living in poverty who weren't necessarily as experienced in meeting in larger groups. And so in terms of getting some training, getting some people there to prepare those people for a full engagement, I think that is probably a best practice that we would have liked to have learned earlier than later. I think by the end, I think we had sort of improved enough to be confident in how we were engaging this incredibly articulate community in a plan that they were very much part of and very much focused on. So even I remember, like yesterday, the final forum where the plan was adopted. An incredible woman from St. John named Juanita Black, someone who lived in our Crescent Valley in the north part of the city, quite a poor area herself, with 30 years of poverty behind her, and was emerging into the workforce herself. And she said, "You know what? I'm in the workforce today because of a policy change by the government that allowed me to keep my health card." So that when I go and work, I'm not worried about being able to get access to prescription drugs and so on. Her Medicare, those additional expenses that wouldn't be covered by Medicare. And she said, but guess what? Next week or the week after, I can't remember exactly, my year runs out. And so, and she said, I haven't had the time yet at this company I'm working at to get the amount of hours and the amount of experience to justify being part of their plan. So we need to extend the policy. 1 year is not enough for me. It's not enough for everybody. So because of that very comment she made, at the final forum, the plan was changed, and the government committed to extending health coverage for things like prescription drugs and other types of medical coverage, physiotherapy, and so on, for an additional 2 years for those who are leaving welfare and going into work. Now, that's not the ultimate in policy reforms, I would admit, but it was an acknowledgement that something had to be done. And the fact that the plan was adapted to that very suggestion, which everyone agreed to in a fair hurry, and that legislation was changed, and this policy became the actual modus operandi in the province for hundreds and hundreds of people, I think is a demonstration of the process that actually did work, that was authentic, that was credible. So, Paul, to your point that, where do great ideas come from? I mean, at the end of the day, people with that experience often have the very best ones.
Exceptional, and really feeling great about the conversation that we're having. And one of the questions that we've been getting from our listeners is, what were the greatest challenges in recruiting those with lived experience to work within your organizations? And they even went further. Her name is Rebecca, and she asks, how did you recruit? Celeste, do you want to jump in on that? How
did I find people? So I literally, like, the roundtable is connected with, Mission Services, Good Shepherd. I, used all of the available resources to me and said, this is what we're doing. And I basically had a sheet that sort of said, this is what the Speakers Bureau is setting out to do, and here's an application form. So it asked a couple of questions about, who the person was and why they thought being a part of the Speakers Bureau would be important, just so that they would have a chance to sort of think about, is this something I want to do? And we would have a chance to say, is this somebody who is in a place in their lives where this would make sense? Recognizing that sometimes, when you're struggling, you can actually be in crisis, and so it might not be a time to put aside time to go into training to a Speakers Bureau. So I actually had some calls with people who were adamant that they wanted to make a difference, but it was clear to me that where they were in their journey probably wasn't a good time. as I mentioned earlier, I also went to food banks, and I went on the street and talked to people and said, here's what I'm doing. Is this something you're interested in? And just basically tried to sell people on the idea that there are people who are interested in us not suffering anymore. And I could say us because I am a person with lived experience, and I think that might have helped. I think of myself as a bit of a bridge because I've had some experience, you know, working in offices and running meetings and things like that. But I've also been, you know, struggling to pay my bills and, you know, using the food banks and freaking out because, you know, my OW's been cut off and now I don't have money and I can't do things. So I really was not speaking to people from a position of power and privilege. It was just like, here's something that we can help to do. And I think that helped to build trust with audiences or with people that I was getting. So to answer your question, yeah, I got applications from all over the place, from people who were on Ontario Works, who had been recommended through their workers, from people that I talked to on the street, from people who, you know, were looking at Volunteer Hamilton website and saw this thing and thought, oh, I'll apply for that. We also had people who were on the roundtable, who were people with lived experience that said, you know what, we're on the roundtable, but I'd really like the chance to tell my story, and they were able to sign up that way.
Bhavana, any thoughts?
Well, I think as Celeste mentioned, trust is a very important part. So we actually worked with agencies who came with people with lived experience, and we also distinguished between, and our agencies reminded us of this, current lived experience or past lived experience. And so what we were looking for were people who were currently living the experience. And so we worked with the agencies, and they had the trust of people they worked with or had worked with, and so that helped us tremendously. They were able to bring them to meetings, let them feel comfortable, and as the person got more comfortable and started trusting the process, they opened up a little bit, and soon they started inviting their friends.
Yeah. And that's pretty much how it works. If I could just jump in here, it's an ongoing process of building and maintaining relationships. So, for example, you know, partway through our training for people who had been accepted into the Speakers Bureau training, some people fell into situations where they couldn't come. They couldn't come to training sessions, and they would call me and say, "Does this mean I'm kicked out of the program because I can't make it?" And so I had to be flexible enough to say, "No, this isn't like your standard. You miss 3 meetings and you're out." The whole process had to be built around understanding that when you are living with these kinds of stresses and challenges, it is not like if I set up a meeting at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon that everybody will be able to make it every single time and bring them their best selves. One of the other things we did in our meetings was have a bit of a check-in. So people would, you know, they would come out to a meeting on a Tuesday morning, and some people by the 3rd week they were able to say, I was just able to get myself here. I'm not going to be able to contribute much. And sometimes they chose to share what was going on, sometimes they didn't. But we had sort of decided from the get-go that we needed to meet people where they were and take them how they were in order to gain the trust to have people share very personal and painful experiences with a broader audience. If we couldn't establish that in our little group, there was no way that we would be able to get people to learn to be comfortable standing in front of strangers and sharing their stories.
Well, and you know, really good practical tips that you've brought forward. I just love it. You know, it feels like what we need to do is have just another, even a couple of series just on the strategy of working and bringing people's lived experience in and hearing more voices. A real interest in this group. So just, hey, Bhavana, Jim, and Celeste, a huge thank you. I'm sure you're getting a round of applause from everyone that's listening today. And we're opening it up for questions now, and a couple have come in, and I just want us to engage in that. I know, Bhavana, when you need to leave, just, you know, go ahead, and we'll say thank you now. I know that you've got another meeting to go to, but, you know, one of the key questions that we've been asked here by several people is they want to know a little bit more about the summit. And just maybe I'll jump in on that. Jim, you know a lot about the summit because you've also been involved, so maybe you could share what some of the highlights are for you. But the Poverty Reduction Summit is a really unique, it's a one-time event So they're saying, is it an ongoing annual event? Well, it might become that. But right now it was sort of saying, how do we bring together all the cities that have poverty reduction strategies? And how do we, and so far we have 47 cities that have that are coming formally. We've got about another times that number who are coming informally. So in other words, what we mean by formally is they are formal members of the Vibrant Communities Network now. So it's very exciting. The network is really growing. And primarily cities become members once they develop a poverty reduction strategy or in the means of doing so. The other thing that we wanted to do is bring together all the provinces and territories that had poverty reduction strategies and bring this leadership into the room together. Now, there are nearly 300 people already registered, and we've just asked the hotel if they could open up some more spaces. I know that the hotel rooms are very limited, but we've been able to get more space to have a bit of a bigger meeting. So we're allowing a few more in. So if you haven't registered yet, now is the time. We have some amazing speakers. We have provincial ministers like Deb Matthews, who is an incredibly powerful politician in Ontario, who's going to be speaking about provinces and poverty reduction strategies. You've got both Don Iveson from Edmonton and Mayor Naheed Nenshi from Calgary. Now, I know it was circumstance that brought those two together, but they are really two of Canada's hottest mayors, and mayors are hot these days. So it's been very interesting to get them to be speaking. There's always a rivalry between them, and they've both taken on poverty in an aggressive way. Mayor Naheed Nenshi obviously is now the mayor of the world. So he's going to be coming both with a personal story, but also throwing out an important challenge to us about why poverty reduction is so important and why his city has done such an amazing job and why it's made him more popular than ever as a mayor. So it's not just something that you take on. The public really wants this. We have some amazing panels, and Jim and Celeste are on those panels, and we're talking about cities reducing poverty, and then in the afternoon on Thursday we're talking about provinces reducing poverty. We've got, I think there are nearly 30 workshops that are being offered by different people and different organizations, so we're going to hear about all the different strategies across the country, and loads of time for people to interact and engage with each other. A big celebration on Wednesday night because we want to recognize that for the first time in Canadian history, the majority of cities and every province and territory are working at poverty in a way that they've never worked before with poverty reduction strategies. Pretty excited about all of that. Jim, your thoughts? You've been involved in the planning.
Yeah, very excited for all the reasons you've mentioned. I'm going to be chairing a panel with some government leaders who are, basically practitioners in poverty reduction from a provincial level. I think it's going to be a really interesting panel to talk about the role, the importance, the value added that provinces can bring to this, and I'm hoping we get a big turnout for that. That's important stuff from a policy point of view, a funding point of view. I mean, we've still got a lot to do. I mean, I think there's some momentum here. The fact that there's going to be so many people in the room together, I mean, you're going to be able to touch the walls on who is practicing poverty reduction in this country. These are our kindred spirits in trying to move the numbers down. And we can learn so much from each other if we have the forum and we have the ability to listen to each other and what our collective and individual community responses are. And that's what this conference offers, is that myriad of chances to interconnect with people just like us from perhaps different sectors, but having that same common goal of having less poverty in this country.
Fabulous. Just want to say a huge thank you to each one of you for joining us on this call, for your enthusiasm, but most importantly for the work that you're doing to end poverty in this country. You know, just recently a poll came out saying that 57% of Canadians believe that we can end poverty in their lifetime. Amazingly optimistic. I really do believe that Canada can be the first country in the world to end economic poverty. I think that there are many forms of poverty, but at least we can end economic poverty here and reduce poverty for a substantial number of people. Our goal when we gather at this summit is to see if we can have an important conversation about what would it take if we all joined together to reduce poverty for 1 million Canadians. And we're meaning 1 million Canadians permanently. Let's reduce poverty by 1/3. And let's do that together in the next 4 to 5 years. What's that going to take? How do we actually do it? And what's working? And we know that we don't have answers. And it's not answers that we're looking for. We know that for most of us that have brought about change in this world, for us it's our questions that have gotten us a lot further than our answers. But we do know that by asking the right questions and by working together in a really important way, we can make a big difference in this country. For those of you who still want to get involved and come to the summit, just go to the Poverty Reduction Summit and if you can get the link at tamarackcommunity.ca. Also, if you have just any questions whatsoever about the summit, do email Natasha at tamarackcommunity.ca, Natasha, N-A-T-A-S-H-A, to ask any of your questions, and we're going to want to help you in any way we can to get there. Thanks again, everyone. You'll be getting a link in a few days with the audio for this gathering. We're pretty excited to share that, pass it on to your colleagues, and looking forward to seeing you May 6 to 8 in Ottawa. Thanks again, everyone.